As much as 2021 has flown by, I've still been able to cram in so many great gaming experiences. Now, it isn't my job to play video games, so I haven't played nearly as much as other video game review channels. In fact, I've only played 3 games that were released this year. So this list is going to be my favourite games that I played for the first time in 2021. And most of those games will be from the early 2000s and the late 2010s. I'm also not a review channel, so don't expect some in-depth review, rather just a couple points that come to mind when I think of the game. And one last thing, there's going to be spoilers for a lot of these games. So without wasting any more time, let's get into my top 10 favourite games of 2021. Number 10, Link's Awakening. When it comes to puzzle games, I tend to get bored pretty easily, as my patience is quite low. However, Link's Awakening was able to hold my attention for about 10 hours, which doesn't sound like that much, but trust me, that's a lot of time for a puzzle game. I couldn't resist exploring the charming world, as there were tons of secrets around every corner, and an array of interesting characters to talk to. I especially loved this animal village. The simple combat was satisfying and made just wandering around more fun than I thought it would be. However, for every praise I can give this game, there were another 2 things wrong with it. For example, there's this dungeon where it gives you the clue, first defeat the imprisoned Paul's voice, last the skeletal Stalfos. How did I do that voice? And of course, that would mean go into this random room, kill the mouse rabbit thing, then the bat, then the skeleton. Of course, it was so obvious. Why would I spend 20 minutes trying to figure out what the fuck was going on? There were definitely more puzzles that left me absolutely confused, but the most frustrating thing about this game was when I did the puzzle or boss the intended way, and for whatever reason it didn't work, so I'd spend 5 minutes trying out different strategies, only to cave in and look it up, just to find out that I did it right the first time, but it just didn't work for some reason. This happened more than once, by the way. I don't know if this is a problem other people have had, but this is my list, so I'm gonna complain, okay? In the end, I never got past the 6th dungeon, but I feel like I got a good sense of how the game worked. At the start, it was fresh and exciting, but by the end, I had discovered about 95% of the world, and my favourite part of the game was no longer fun. So I put the game down and haven't returned to it since. Overall, I would give this game a 6.5 out of 10. Number 9, A Hat in Time. For years, this game was always praised as one of the best indie platformers, so my expectations for the game were very high. I was gonna wait till I got a better PC to play it, but I eventually caved in and bought the Switch version, which is definitely rough around the edges, but the graphics and performance never really bothered me. The only thing that bothered me was how there was never that moment where the game just clicked for me. I was definitely enjoying my time with the game, but I was just waiting for that one level to blow me away, and it never came. The best levels, in my opinion, are the ones where you get to explore the massive sandbox area. My favourite level was the Cat DLC level, which combined intense platforming segments with a sprawling world to explore. Some other good levels were the Mafia City and the final boss. If all the levels were as good as these ones, then the game probably would be 4th on the list. I do appreciate how each level feels very different from one another, but in doing that, there are some levels that are much worse. The Haunted Creek and Mountain level were levels I did not care for at all. And when you have a game as short as this, that makes about 30% of the game uninteresting. With a sandbox-like game, it's pretty important that the controls feel fluid and fun to mess around with. And this game somewhat achieves that, as the double jump and dive are fun and give the player enough movement to easily traverse most of the levels. But in terms of vertical movement, this game is lacking, as the double jump doesn't give you much height, and that's really all you get in terms of vertical movement. Overall, I would give this game a 6.5 out of 10. Number 8, Psychonauts. The original Psychonauts sits in such a weird spot. Many people would consider this to be a cult classic, but at the same time the demand for a second game was astronomical. However, I believe a lot of its success in recent times has come from it being such an accessible game. Like, I picked it up for about $6 on the PlayStation Store, and it's even gone as low as $1 on Steam. After buying this at 12 AM and then playing it for the following 6 hours, I now understand why so many people consider this to be one of the best platformers ever. The main aspect that got me so heavily invested in the game was definitely its world. And by world, I don't just mean the beautiful campgrounds that have tons of secrets and collectibles. I mean the characters and how they interact with the world. So much of the charm in this game comes from the campers. They're all so distinct, yet you can clearly see the style of comedy the writers bring forth. After talking to a couple of campers, I made it my mission to talk to every camper I could. Here's some of my favourite lines.
Are you ready to face torture, insanity, and death? Cause this is your last chance to chicken out.
Oh, me, sir. I'd like to chicken out, please.
I've got a man on the inside.
I get it. You grabbed one of the squirrel's nuts, and now you're using clairvoyance on it to form a mental link and see what the squirrel sees.
Could you say acorns instead of nuts if you repeat that to anybody else?
Lily, a deranged man is building an army of psychic death tanks to take over the world, and there's no one who can stop him, except for you and me.
Oh my god! Let's make out!
In terms of actual gameplay, I would say this game is solid, but the real draw of this game is the crazy level design. Because each level is based in the minds of people you meet, it both serves as a creative environment that has no limits and a great way to illustrate the story. The first couple levels don't really take advantage of this as their tutorials, but some of the later levels like Longfishopolis, Waterloo World, and Milkman's Conspiracy take full advantage of their environment to not only deliver a fun and exciting level, but also tell an impactful story, except for maybe the Longfish one. That one was kinda whack. But not all the levels are winners. In fact, the one that broke me was Black Velvetopia. A lot of people would consider this to be one of the best levels, but to me, I would consider this one of, if not the worst level in the entire game. Everything looks so similar in this level, so trying to figure out where you are and where to go is always way more confusing than it has to be. But the most annoying thing about this level is how you need a bunch of arrowheads to actually progress. I didn't have enough arrowheads, so I proceeded to waste about an hour trying to figure out what to do, just to find out that there was nothing I could do. Also, I'm kind of stuck in this level and don't know how to exit to get more arrowheads. This isn't a complaint, I'm just genuinely asking for help. Like, I literally haven't been able to move past this point in the game. Anyways, that sort of brings me to another major problem I had with this game. There's a certain point in the game where you need a cobweb duster to progress, and of course that's locked behind a paywall, so you have to buy a dowsing rod, to which then you go to random locations and dig up arrowheads. This is such a convoluted way to progress. It makes me wonder why the hell they even kept this in the game. Overall, the game is extremely fun and memorable, and if it weren't for the negative experience I had later in the game, I would have put this in the top 3, but ultimately I would give this game a 7 out of 10. Number 7, Mario Sunshine. This game is probably the biggest love-hate relationship I have with any game. On one end, I absolutely adore the movement, as it's fun to boot up the game for the sole purpose of messing around in the hub world. And the flexibility of your movement allows you to pull off crazy tricks like this. Dude, I'm through it! Yes! Let's go! I actually got it! But also, the amount of jank that is in this game is incomprehensible. Don't even get me started on the floodless levels. The second you take away flood, you realize how broken this game is. I think this clip perfectly sums up the controls of the game. I want to be careful with this. Okay. No! Most 3D Mario games have a very diverse set of levels, but Sunshine is the only game in the series that has stuck to a theme throughout the entire game. On one end, it's really interesting, and coupled with the fact that you can see other levels in the background, makes this one of the most immersive 3D Mario games. But on the other hand, it makes the levels feel really similar, as there's 3 levels that take place on a beach. Granted that 2 of them expand into more diverse levels, but when trying to distinguish these levels, despite there only being 7, it's hard to remember them all, because they blend together so easily. Another major flaw that you've probably heard everyone talk about by now is how you can't complete the shrines in whatever order you want. Instead, you have to complete the 7th mission of each level, which is always the same mission. This structure doesn't just cause the problem that you can't skip missions you find frustrating, but it also caused me to just give up on the game after I completed the final boss, which no other Mario game has made me do. When I completed the final boss in Mario 64 for the first time, I instantly wanted to jump back into the game and go for 100%, but with Sunshine I felt so drained from the game forcing me to do objectives that I lost any motivation to continue. On an old illegal file that got deleted when I accidentally spilt water on my MacBook, I got 69 shrines and felt like I had experienced the entire game. This is surprising because there are actually 120 shrines in the game, so apparently I had only experienced just over 50% of the game. But in reality, the types of shrines I was missing were blue coin shrines because I forgot to trade them in, 100 coin shrines, and some shrines in the hub world. Why would anyone want to go for 100% when about 80 of the shrines are actual missions and the other 60 is just filler content? Overall, I would give this a 7.5 out of 10. 7.3 out of 10. Number 6. Mario Party Superstars. From this point on, all the games on this list are pretty much all positive experiences. Like, how can you play this game and not just smile the whole time? This is exactly what the top 100 should have been, and the fact that they could get such a fantastic idea wrong was what made me so worried for this game initially. But it plays how it should, with 5 boards all diverse enough to keep the game fresh, 100 minigames from all console games throughout the series, and a plethora of quality of life improvements. I will say the minigame selection is definitely the best of any game in the series. However, the support for the Wii titles is seriously lacking. Mario Party 8 has 2 minigames, Mario Party 9 has 4, and they didn't even bring back ballistics or peak precision, and Mario Party 10 has 3. My favourite feature about this game has to be its online mode, that goes against everything the Mario Maker 2 online mode stood for, and is actually playable. I live in Australia and was able to play against people all the way in America with only a little bit of lag, and even if you don't have anyone to play with, you can just play against random people in your area, which is so much fun. Overall, this game is everything I want it to be, but obviously not my ideal Mario Party game. I would give this game a 7.5 out of 10. Number 5. Celeste. Celeste is such a well-crafted 2D platformer that really goes to show the genre isn't dead after almost 40 years. For years, I always knew I would love this game, but like most of the games on this list, I waited until I could get it on sale. The game only has 3 movement options, which are jump, dash, and climb. Yet there are so many applications for these movements. Like in level 2 you're able to dash through these weird star cubes, and in level 5 there are these boxes that you hang onto, and when you let go you get a momentum boost. The developers do such a fantastic job of keeping the game simple, so that the difficulty comes from trying to adapt to the level, and not trying to learn 20 new mechanics that are just dumped on you at the start of the level. I always thought this was a linear game, but it turns out this is more of an open 2D game. The first level looks like this, and a lot of the later levels get way more open-ended, with plenty of secrets. The main collectible in this game is the strawberries, which are scattered around the level, usually offering a puzzle or extra challenge. These are very fun to collect, but they serve absolutely no purpose, which honestly is the biggest flaw with this game. It would have been better if the strawberries were used to unlock levels, or if they were used to unlock cosmetics. Another collectible are the B-side tapes. These are quite difficult to find, but after you find them, the actual challenge begins. The B-side tapes are some of the hardest platforming challenges I've ever faced. Just beating the first B-side tape took me 262 attempts, and that was supposedly the easiest of them. The last collectible you can get is the blue heart. This is the hardest collectible to find, but is definitely the most rewarding to find. Except for this one. This one literally references a glitch from Mario Bros 3. Overall, I would give this game an 8 out of 10. Number 4. Crash Bandicoot 4. After playing through the Insane trilogy, I was initially worried for this game, as Toys for Bobs didn't have any experience with creating Crash Bandicoot. Sure, they put a fresh coat of paint on the game, but surely they were nowhere near as good as designing levels as Naughty Dog were. I am glad to say I was very wrong, as Crash 4 seems to take all the elements that made the original trilogy so good, then add a modern twist to it, making this game feel like a continuation of Crash instead of another Crash Bandicoot copy. It's hard to say what makes the levels so good, as it's not as good as the best 2D platformers, and nowhere near as good as the best 3D platformers, but the in-between style makes all the levels feel fresh, as there aren't many 3D platformers that are confined to such a small area. And I think that's what makes the game so fun. The levels are so tightly designed with designated paths, much like 2D platformers, yet the game is 3D, so the level design can feel extremely different to both 2D and 3D platformers. One thing you should know about this game is that it's hard as balls. The first couple levels aren't much, but when you get to the Cherry Blossom world, it starts to get really hard. Do yourself a favor and swallow your pride and just play on modern mode. Another favor you should do yourself is to never go for 100% in this game. By the end of the journey, I'm sure you'll just hate yourself. To get 100%, this is all the things you need to do. There are some objectives that I think make sense, like less than 3 deaths or find the hidden gem, but stuff like collect 80% of Wumpa Fruit or smash all the boxes I just find really stupid. The Wumpa Fruit is something you're just normally collecting, and most of the time you'll have 80% without even trying to get that reward. And collecting all the boxes is such a tedious task, especially considering how hidden some of these boxes are. No one can convince me that stopping from playing the level then smashing the boxes is fun. Crash 1 seems to think very differently.
He needs some milk!
Overall, this game is bursting with personality and creativity, and definitely deserves an 8 out of 10. Number 3, Jak 2. Around January of this year, I managed to purchase the Jak and Daxter collection for just $6. To say this was a deal would be an understatement. Now this is how you do emulation right. Nintendo. Naughty Dog are a very well respected developer, but in between their rise to fame with Crash Bandicoot and their cinematic masterpiece Uncharted, they created the Jak and Daxter series for the PS2. When Naughty Dog is discussed, I swear people always leave out the Jak and Daxter series, which is a shame, because for me, these are some of the defining games for the PS2. Jak 2 was a very drastic change from the original, and even though I like the original more, the second game is still a very good game in its own right. The game is mission based, which means there's a lot of variety in this game. There's the classic gun missions, the racing missions, the platforming missions, the whatever this is missions, and the worst mission to ever exist. Later in the game, they try and mix and mash a lot of the mission types to make it even harder. And trust me, this game gets ridiculously hard. I want to take a little time to mention the missions that made me cry the most. There's the whack-a-mole minigame, there's parrot minigame in the tent, there's jet race mission, defending the person in the grass area mission, the blue rings race, and of course, the worst mission to ever exist. Although all these missions are really hard, it's so rewarding when you actually complete them, because the game does not assist you in any way. There's no new checkpoints, no tips, no invincibility, nothing but you eventually getting better over time. Overall, I would give this game an 8.5 out of 10. Number 2, Jak and Daxter. One of the biggest selling points for this game was how the world was interconnected, and that there were no loading screens. Now this isn't an open world game. When you zoom out, you can clearly see it's a bunch of levels stuck together. But this world still feels so atmospheric, that to me, it felt like one interconnected world. There's a total of 16 levels that all feel varied, and not just visually, but also in their objectives. For example, the beach level is very open and free, so it encourages exploration. Then the water temple level is more focused on tight platforming and puzzle solving. My favourite level was the Forbidden Jungle, as it's the most varied level, with just general exploration, platforming, a plant boss, and this cool fishing minigame. Here's another cool thing about the game. There's no backtracking. From the very start of the game, you've unlocked every move you need, so every single orb from each level can be obtained the second you get there. I love this so much, because it lets you know when there's a puzzle in front of you that looks impossible, that it actually is possible. Because nothing's more frustrating than trying to attempt a puzzle just to find out, oh, you gotta unlock something later on just so you can come back here and do that simple task that you totally could have done right then and there if you just had the ability. I feel like this game is most similar to Mario 64, as you have a bunch of small sandbox levels with about 7 objectives in all of them, and you can do the missions in whatever order you want, and most of the objectives are focused on platforming and puzzle solving. Except where this game has a one-up on Mario 64 is how when you get a power orb, you don't get kicked out of the level. Because you can play in whatever order you want, each person's experience will be different, but for me, I went through the game my own way, just to find out I had completely skipped an entire boss, of which there are only 3 in the game. I would highly recommend that you play this game, as it's probably in my top 10 favourite games of all time. Overall, I would give this game a 9.5 out of 10. Number 1, It Takes Two. It Takes Two is a masterclass in co-op game design. No other co-op experience is designed so tightly to ensure that both players are pushed to their limits. Thankfully for me, this is not just one of the best co-op experiences I've ever had, but it is also one of the best 3D platformers of all time. The premise of It Takes Two is that you play as a couple on the verge of divorce that have been transformed into dolls by their witch of a daughter, Rose. So you go through modified areas of your house, and because these areas are modified, they lead to some of the most creative platforming challenges. Like this entire squirrel wall takes place inside of a single tree. It's not just filled with insane platforming challenges, as the game will constantly switch up the game style. At one point you're grappling around on a tree, then you're sliding around on rails, then you're shooting wasps in an arena, then you're steering a massive boat, then there's this massive whale thing, and apparently all of this is in a tree. How the fuck do you fit a whale in a tree? Now the tree is one whole chapter of the game, and I barely scratched the surface with all the things you do in that level, because I don't want to spoil the game too much. But trust me, this is probably the most creative 3D platformer I've ever played. Not only is there a bunch of game style switch ups, but there are tons of interactive things to do. Like in the tree level, there's just this random camera laying around that lets you get into a position and take a photo. This isn't for a mission or any collectible, it's just there for you to mess around with. So on top of that, there are also mini-games, where instead of working together, you get to verse your teammate in a quick mini-game. I don't want to spoil too much of the level themes, but my favourite two mini-games were Batting Team and Lava Ball. Something interesting about the mini-games is that they don't just give you the mini-games every now and again, you actually have to go out of your way to find them. I absolutely adore this choice, as it encourages you to constantly explore, and constant exploration doesn't just get you mini-games, but it ensures that you interact with all the little secrets in the level. Now probably the worst thing about this game is the story. It's not that bad, but listening to these two fight constantly and have a really quick change of attitude was not fun. The Book of Love acts as their therapist and is constantly forcing them through challenges so that they can work together, but they are so resistant to ever work together until the very end. Also, the Book of Love can die for all I care. However, there were certain points of the story that I really liked that mostly involved the side characters, and there's this extremely dark point in the story. It's pretty early in the game, but it surprised the absolute hell out of me. Once again, I'm not going to spoil it, but you should definitely experience this game yourself. Overall, this isn't just my favourite game of 2021, but could very well be my favourite game of all time. To be fair, I haven't thought about it too hard, but this game could rival any of the 3D Mario games, and I hope it goes down as one of the best 3D platformers of all time. I would give this game a 10 out of 10. Even though there are some things I don't like about the game, which technically wouldn't make the game perfect, I think we should all acknowledge a game will never be perfect. But this game is just so good that all the pros outweigh any of the cons significantly, and in my eyes, that warrants a 10 out of 10 score. Even though I played nowhere near as much games as other gaming channels, I still feel like I had a fulfilling 2021 and got to play most of the games that I wanted to. But now with 2022 on the horizon, actually 2022 is right now because I'm just really slow with making this video, I can't help but get extremely excited for the games coming out this year. My watchlist for 2022 is Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Breath of the Wild 2, Pokemon Legends Arceus, and Horizon Forbidden West. Once again, not that many games, but hopefully these will be some of the best games I've ever played. Except for Pokemon, I just don't trust Game Freak enough. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in 2022. I guess I will see you in 2022, because it is 2022 right now. But you get the point.